Good morning. Good morning. God morning. Great top of the morning to you and welcome back to Let's Talk Live. Yes, this is our Tuesday Talks with yours truly, your host, the Dr. Nicole Lowe, and I am the People's Coach. Look, I want you to join the conversation. The chat is up. Last week we were having technical difficulties and the monkey was letting us know it was some issues going on. But if you have subscribed, then you can actually chat live with us. And so go ahead and give some good mornings. Give some good mornings. Get some good mornings in here. I know you may be preparing for your day, but we do have a continuous conversation for you. And we want you to participate. Why? Because when you're, or as you're becoming a healthier you, then you produce a healthier life for you, whether it's personally, professionally, publicly, or privately. It's your life, and you want to live it as a healthy life. Hey, good morning. I see you, Daryl, y'all. That's my boo. That's my honey. Yes, aka D Lowe. Thank you for being here. I just love him. As a matter of fact, that just gives me a great segue because I did want to give some shout outs this morning to some people, some amazing people that I had a conversation with. I want to give a shout out to Andrea, all the way from North Carolina, with her 10-year-old grandson. They are so amazing. We had an amazing conversation about parenting and boundaries with our educational system, and also just today's parenting and how we handle our responsibilities of parenting. And it was interesting because her grandson, he's 10, and he was giving us high fives and agreement and all of that. So I thought that was amazing. And then, of course, my uncle Leroy, he is always supportive. He's always here. He was listening in last week and he gave me some feedback. And hey, Unc, I got my water today. I shouldn't be choking. And then, of course, Minister Sherry Bryant, who's always trying to show her love and support. And again, my awesome husband. Hey, honey, thanks for being here. So, you all go ahead and get in the chat, send some love. It's still my birthday month. We're going to be celebrating all month long. And I want to give a shout out to all those who came and supported my birthday Sunday experience. Sherry Bryan, our neighbor Rhonda, and my wonderful son, John, come on, CEO of SWAC Media LLC. So doing some amazing things. I'm so proud of him. So we're going to get started because we know that it's early in the morning, and it's early in the morning and we have things to do, but I'm glad that you're here and you're kicking off your morning with you know who, the People's Coach. All right, Dr. Lowe. So as you know, I'm going to jump right in here. We were talking about boundaries on last week. And our quote for last week, I'm not going to tell you. You have to go check out the feed on last week. What was that quote? That quote was fire, y'all. But this week's quote is: the only people that get upset about you setting boundaries are the ones who were benefiting from you not having any. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. The only people that get upset about you setting boundaries are the ones who were benefiting from you not having any. Whether they were benefiting emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, whatever the benefit was, or whatever the benefit is, they don't want you to set healthy boundaries because they get to benefit, and you are not benefiting from not having healthy boundaries. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Let's get informed, right? So what are boundaries? Boundaries are limits and rules that we set for ourselves within relationships, whether they're personal relationships, or if they are romantic relationships, whether they're business relationships, professional relationships, whatever relationships we engage in. And everyone has some form of relationship, whether it's with your family, with your children, whether it's at your church, it's in your marriage, it's you're doing business, as I stated earlier, political affiliations, community affiliations, because we interact with people. So it we have to set boundaries, and those boundaries need to be healthy boundaries. And people have different types of boundaries. Boundaries are determined by your own family culture, about communal community cultures, is set by the environments by which you were groomed and also are raised in, or just information you have gained or information you have not gained. Because boundaries can be set also out of ignorance or not set at all. But at the end of the day, in order for us to live a productive life, a healthy life, a life of peace, joy, and happiness, we must establish boundaries. So last week, I talked to you about three, and I named the three types of boundaries. They're not exclusive, but these are some of the main boundaries that we have to set in our lives, or people have in their lives. One are rigid boundaries, and rigid boundaries are the boundaries that are protective. They're very protective. You don't share information, and you avoid certain situations or people, trying to avoid rejection. And I talked about how I was the master of rigid boundaries, because it didn't it didn't take me a minute to just cut people off, especially when they were rude, especially when they were disrespectful. I just had a term: when respect leaves the room, you know what? I'm following respect, right? And so we all have different types of boundaries, and rigid boundaries, sometimes they're really known as protective boundaries. We become very protective, and oftentimes it comes from a place of trauma or just life experiences where you've had bad experiences, and you just do not want to run the risk of having those same experiences. So you become very protective of yourself because of a lack of trust. And then there are porous boundaries, and these boundaries are more passive and more freelance. And then there are healthy boundaries, which are more balanced. So today we want to talk a little bit more about the porous boundaries. And those with porous boundaries are more of the oversharers. They overshare their personal information. They don't need permission from somebody to share all their personal information. It's kind of the term that we labeled over the last few years TMI, too much information. You're giving too much information. That information was not necessary. And also, people who have difficulty saying no to others. And I shared in my story in the last session, and you can go back and review it. I was one of those people. And a lot of that was the reason why I had a problem and challenge to say no to others without feeling guilty or feeling bad or feeling as if I did something wrong, is because of the environment that I was groomed in as a young girl. And you can hear more of that information on our last session. And then also, people who get over involved in someone else's problems. Some things don't belong to you. You have to take a step back and say, you know what? That's not my problem. And we have to be careful, because when we have porous boundaries, passive boundaries, you'll become someone's garbage can, meaning that you'll be the person that they're always complaining to. They're always coming your way and some of that is because when we need to feel like we are needed, then people who are gossipers, people who feel like they have the right to access all of our time, they gravitate to us. and they just pour and pour and pour. And it's nothing wrong with someone coming to confide in you, but usually these people, they continue to share information with you, and they're not willing to take responsibility or be a part of the change that they want to see in their own lives. And you continue to allow them to just pour into you all that toxicity, all of that garbage. That's someone with a porous boundary. And it's and more or less the passive boundary. And then also, you're dependent on the opinions of others. What people say about you, what people think about you, mean more to you than what you think and what you say about you. I was guilty of that at one time as well. I knew better about myself, but I allowed the opinion of others to override what I knew about me, because again, I was groomed in a certain environment where there was so much disapproval. No matter of what I did, I was seeking the approval of someone. And approval is nice, but it's not necessary. Oh, I'm gonna say that again. You can tweet that, put that on a t-shirt. Approval is nice, but it is not necessary. When you know who you are, when you value who you are, that's why we're talking about healthy boundaries. You are very protective, or very specific about what people say to you, and even how they say it to you. But I had to grow to a place of healthy boundaries, and we'll talk about that next week. And then not only that, you are accepting of abuse and disrespect. You excuse, you give concessions for abuse, whether it is spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, physical abuse. Nobody has a right, and this is about adults. No one has a right. I don't care how upset they get with you. No one has a right, whether you're a male or a female, to put their hands on you. I talk often about relationships and romantic relationships. When you're in a romantic relationship as an adult, it is an adult to adult relationship, an adult to adult conversation, engagement, interaction. It is not supposed to be an adult to a child relationship, an adult to a child engagement or interaction. You have a right to have opinions. You have a right to share your feelings. You have a right to display your emotions respectfully, and to also have yours respected. And so when we're talking about porous boundaries, then we're talking about you being accepting of abuse, and you should not accept and settle for abuse or disrespect from anyone. That's emotionally, people making mockery of how you feel. That's disrespectful. Even mentally, making mockery of how you think and things of that nature. That's disrespectful, and it's abuse. Saying, feeling that they can say anything to you. People can say stuff to you. You don't have to submit to that. You don't have to engage. When I begin to become a healthier me, instead of just receiving what people would say to me, they feel like they can say anything to me or do anything to me. I started excusing myself from their presence, because as long as you're in my jurisdiction, then I can ask you to leave. But when I'm anywhere else, I have the right to leave. You do not have to sit in the presence of anyone that's verbally abusing you, emotionally abusing you, mentally abusing you, physically abusing you. You have a right to release yourself. You don't need permission to release yourself from any type of relationship, toxic relationship, or abusive relationship. You don't have to have anyone's permission. So, but in order for that to happen, and in order for things of that nature to stop, you have to set healthy boundaries for you. You have to learn to stop abusing yourself. You have to learn to respect yourself. And a lot of that settling comes from fear of rejection, of not complying with what you think someone wants you to comply with, or the fear of losing out on something. I was listening to one of the talk show hosts on yesterday, and it was a lady there, and she knew she was in an abusive situation, relationship, and they had two children. And she kept saying, well, I know this is bad. I know it's abusive, but I don't want my children to grow up without a two-parent household. But if in that household you're dying because someone is killing you with their words, killing you with their with the emotional and physical abuse, you're not helping your children. What you're doing is teaching your children that it's okay for that behavior to continue, because children learn from what they see more than what they hear you say. Oh, that right there will speak. It will preach. Children, I'm going to say it again. Children learn more from what they see than more than from what they hear you say. So boundaries, healthy boundaries are important. Passivity is not healthy. That's like I talked about the fence last week. That's like you keeping your fence open all the time. So anybody can walk in and out of your property without your permission, without your consent. It's like keeping your doors unlocked and a burglar comes by. You can't say that they broke and entered because your door was open. They just walked in. And no one has a right to just walk in and out of your life with abuse, toxicity, and just trying to control your life. You are supposed to be in control of you and you only. And usually, when someone does not have walk and exercise in self-control, they try and control what's around them externally. You don't have internal control, so you try and take control of what's external, the situations, the people around you, and that is not healthy. And the truth of the matter is, whenever you're trying to control something or someone else, it just adds more pressure and stress, because the truth of the matter is, you are not called to control anybody. Neither one of I'm not called to control anyone. I can give recommendations, I can give information, but we are not called to control anyone. So you can either have rigid boundaries, you can have porous boundaries, and if you want to learn more on how to build and receive tools on how to literally strengthen your borders, your personal borders, which are your boundaries, you can always visit my website at dweedcoaching.com. And you can also send us a message at dweedmylife@gmail.com. And of course, we're going to open up the lines later if you want to call in and you have a question, or you want to send us a question in the chat. You can call us at 408-598-2602. We would love to hear from you. Now, let's talk a little further about boundaries. We're talking about porous boundaries today. Last week, we talked about rigid boundaries. And the truth is, you could have interchangeably different types of boundaries. It depends on the setting. You may have a different set of boundaries at work. You may have a different set of boundaries in your relationship. You might have all the boundaries in whatever relationship, but it just depends on the persons. It depends on the environment. It depends on the situation. So now I want to talk about two types of boundaries. When I'm done with this session and with this series, we're going to have discuss 6 types of boundaries: physical boundaries, intellectual boundaries, emotional boundaries, sexual boundaries, material boundaries, and last but not least, time boundaries. So this morning, I want to talk about 2 types of boundaries. So we're going to talk about physical boundaries and intellectual boundaries. And so physical boundaries, when we're addressing those boundaries, physical boundaries, we're talking about your personal space and physical touch. Now, I don't know about you, and there's a lot of people that don't intentionally mean any harm, but they say things like, I'm touchy feely. And I don't mean any harm, but I'm just touchy. And the truth is, when you're touchy feely and you actually touching on someone, people who talk with their hands. I know you know who I'm talking about. They talk with their hands, and you may be one of those people. And as I stated, you may not mean any harm. However, when you touch someone without their permission, that's overstepping a boundary. You're actually being intrusive to their personal space and physically touching them. Not everyone wants to be touched. And I'm one of those persons. I am not supportive for myself, for my own personal boundary. I don't like people to just reach out and touch me. You can talk to me with your lips, but not with your hands. And so when it comes down to physical boundaries, you have to be aware, one, as a person, of what's appropriate for you and what is not. Um, because there are different types of relationships. And that's why we have to get to know people. We can't just assume that everything that we do is okay with everybody. Let's talk about hugs. Everybody may not want a hug. They may not want you to touch their hands. I give them a kiss. I've had situations like this. Yes, this is real life. I was just working out on the track on last week, and the first things first, I felt a little eerie because I felt like somebody was behind me. I couldn't see him when I turned around at first, but finally I realized there was a gentleman walking behind me, directly behind me, that made me feel uncomfortable. And I addressed it. I said, I am so sorry. Um, I asked him, why are you walking directly behind me like that? And he became a little bit intrusive in my personal space because he moved, but he walked over to me and reached out his hand like he wanted to shake my hand, but he came really close to me. And I moved my hand back. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know you. I don't want to shake your hand. And he grabbed my hand anyway. That's a violation of my boundary. Anyone, after you've told them you don't want them to do something and they do it anyway, that's a violation of your personal boundary. He violated my personal space. So that means that he's one of the people, as the quote said this morning, usually people who are upset about you establishing healthy boundaries are people who benefit from you not having any, right? And I didn't know him. I had never seen this man a day in my life. So I thought that was amazing that a perfect stranger felt like he had the right to touch me anyway. So we have to be very conscious and cognitive of people. What is customary maybe in your family may not be customary with someone else's family. So you have to ask permission, or you need to observe what the custom is and then still ask if it's okay if I give you a hug. And I remember another situation where there was a gentleman, they said it was a pastor. He kissed everybody at the church and he tried to kiss me. Oh, I don't play that. Don't walk up and try and kiss me. I don't want you to kiss me. The only person I want kissing me is my husband. Hello, somebody. And I know my husband appreciates that. But we have to understand and be aware of what we are comfortable with. Your personal boundaries has to do with your limits and your rules that you have within your relationships. And sometimes we don't communicate what that is, and we need to communicate it. And like I stated, not all the time are people intentionally trying to violate your boundaries. Sometimes they're just accustomed to their own traditions, and it's okay to let someone know, I am so sorry. I am not comfortable with someone just hugging me. I don't mean to offend you. And it's sad that when you express your boundaries, people get offended. And you should not be offended when someone share with you their boundaries. Actually, you should be honored that they shared it with you. And then in return, you should offer them an apology and then move forward by respecting the boundary, especially when you have healthy boundaries yourself. So it's just like going to someone's home. You should not just walk in someone's home and then begin to walk all over their house. Now, if they give you permission to do so and they tell you it's okay, that's different. But we have to learn how to establish boundaries. And as we establish boundaries, your boundaries may be different, but we have to learn to respect other people's boundaries. So just ask the question, is it okay for me to do XYZ, whatever it is that you're wanting to do, because you do not have a right to just enter someone's personal space without their permission. You do not have a right to touch someone. Just because you're friendly does not mean you have to touch anyone. So get their permission, ask them if it's okay. Um, because when we do that, it shows a person that you care about them and you respect them. Okay. All right. So that's on physical boundaries. Now let's talk about intellectual boundaries. When we're talking about intellectual boundaries, we're talking about thoughts and ideas. And I don't know about you, but sometimes people can be very condescending, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. And what do I mean about condescending? They don't have respect for someone else's perspective. They don't have respect for someone else's thoughts. They don't have respect for someone else's ideas. They feel like, oh, what you said, oh, it doesn't matter. And you know how people use little colloquialism, your little project, your little thoughts, they add the little to it. And like I stated, sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not, because sometimes it's just customarily how they speak. But that should not excuse your behavior just because you're accustomed to doing it. It's called growth. And when you find that certain conversation or certain communication or words offend someone, respect that. It may not offend one of your friends, but it may offend another friend. Respect that. Because when you're a healthier you help everything else around you become healthy. I'm just saying. So, appropriateness about how to appropriate conversations. Is this a good time to talk about politics? Is this a good time to talk about, I don't know, the weather? Whatever it is this an appropriate time? You know how we talk about, you have to read the room. You have to scan the room, whether it's with your children, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's with a business meeting. Is that the appropriate time? If you don't care about how others feel per se, or you don't have boundaries or respect boundaries, you will say anything at any time to anyone, regardless if it sounds like it's belittling or condescending, because that's really what it is. And when you are dismissive of what other people feel, then that's just disrespectful and it's rude. And it shows that you do not have healthy intellectual boundaries and you don't respect other people's boundaries. And the truth is, usually when you have healthy boundaries, you respect other people's boundaries. You do. And excuse me, I'm going to pull this information right quick because I wanted to share some information, some just some highlights with y'all. And so, and sharing that. So there were two even scriptures, y'all, that I found. It says, Proverbs 10:14 says, the wise don't tell everything they know, but the foolish talk too much and are ruined. In other words, you oversharing and you share everything. You're not supposed to share everything. As a matter of fact, everybody's not on your team. Everybody don't want to see you succeed. And sharing information and oversharing or sharing information too soon can actually disrupt your process, whether it's your process of growing or your process of advancing, whatever it is. There's another scripture, I don't have it, but it says, don't cast your pearls before swine. Why? Because they're trampling under, not calling anyone a pig, but it's an analogy, and it's symbolic, because when you share too much information, you can be excited and someone will dismiss it because they don't believe in you. They don't have the faith that you have. They don't see what you see. And sometimes it's just good to be quiet, protect yourself, maintain the boundaries of your peace, maintain the boundaries of your authenticity, maintain the boundaries of your life, your personal boundaries. No one has to know everything about you. But when you have porous boundaries, you overshare, you're passive. So it's okay for people just to say, do, access anything. But I'm encouraging you to take a step back. And a lot of times we share information with people that don't value you. And how do we know they don't value you? They don't value you because of the way they mistreat you and mishandle you. They don't respect your decisions. They don't respect your choices. They don't respect anything that you do. And they demonstrate it to you all the time. But yet you keep sharing that information with them. You keep you won't even tell them no, and they don't mean you any good. They just want to take advantage of you, and they want access to you. Why? So that they can know what's going on with you. And sometimes it's so that they can try and sabotage your thought process, your encouragement, your joy, your peace. And you are the one that are responsible for establishing your boundaries. No one else. No one is responsible for that but you. And that's why we're here sharing this information, because it's your responsibility to become a healthier you so that you can produce a healthier life for you. And when you are healthy, everything around you begins to become healthy. Okay. So basically, I just want to encourage you, be aware of your personal boundaries. Reevaluate them. If you're feeling like you're being taken advantage of, you're exhausted behind people and negative attitudes, and you're exhausted behind your own negative attitudes, you have to change the way you think about you. You are beautifully, you are wonderfully made, you're fearfully made. God made you to be a great person. You are great. Greatness is on the inside of you, whether you feel great or not. But your image of yourself has to change. Your image has to change about you. Nobody has a right to just do and say anything concerning you. And you have a right to feel, you have a right to heal, and you have a right to thrive. But you have to take authority over your own life. You don't take authority over anybody else's life. You take authority over your life. So your physical boundaries are important. Your personal space is your personal space. No one, you don't have to receive a touch or just take a touch from anybody. Nobody should just hug you if you don't want to be hugged. Nobody should be touching you anywhere, period, without your consent. Because if it's without your consent, it's a violation. And your intellectual boundaries, you need to guard that. And that's so important, to guard your intellectual boundaries. What you think, how you feel, your thoughts and ideas. Stop sharing your thoughts and ideas with people who don't believe in you. Stop sharing your thoughts and ideas with people who are negative about life, period. Because why would they be positive about your life when they're so negative about their own? Because the Bible says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And guess what? He thinks that about everybody else too. So I'm pretty much done. And I pray that this session helped you. Boundaries, they're very important. Next session, we're going to talk about how to establish boundaries within families and parenting. OMG. Yes, you must set healthy boundaries with your family members because family members seem to think that they are entitled. But guess what? So do your children. So we're going to talk about that next week and do some more ouches and oh my gosh. But you have a right, okay? You have a right to establish healthy boundaries. And if you want more information, again, you can visit my website at dbcoaching.com and schedule a Q15 consult. And you can ask questions and get some advice and counsel for up to 30 minutes. Or if it gets deeper, we can go from there and I can tell you what the next steps are. But I'm going to go ahead and open up the lines. If you want to give us a call, you can call us at 408 598 2602. And we'd love to hear your question. We are live and we'll be able to give you some feedback live. Also, I want you all to keep your ears to the grind because we have some events coming up soon in April. And I want to make sure you're in. It's an event for women. And then we'll also be scheduling some for men. And so we're excited about that. And we're looking, just waiting. If you have any comments, go ahead and put them in the chat. Okay. Well, I think we're done for this session. Whew, I pray that once you make it to school or have interaction with your family or wherever your journey leads you today, that you begin today. You begin right now to know that you have the right to establish boundaries. You have a right to do so. And I'm thinking, do we have a caller? Let's see here.
Gerald Lowe.
We do have a caller.
Hello?
Hi, thank you for calling. Can you state your name and where you're calling from? What city?
Yes, my name is Daryl. I'm calling you from Humble, Texas.
Okay, Daryl. Thank you for calling into the show. How may we have you? What's on your mind?
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to be on this podcast. I heard about you, and I'm just elated to have an opportunity to speak. But I do have a question about boundaries, and and my question is that is boundaries just a um, a a method of conduct, that certain things that you make a decision about how you want to live your life, and and how you want other people to accept your way of living and way of being understood. It's set up by your own personal boundaries. So, so is it really more of a matter of establishing your conduct on how you would like to be understood by setting your boundaries?
Well, I believe you gave me a two-part question. Let me just repeat it back to you so I can make sure I understand what your question is. So you're asking me, is boundaries a method of conduct and behavior and making sure that people understand and accept what you want and how you want to be treated? Is that pretty much your question?
Yes.
Okay. So, two things here. Boundaries is actually the limits and rules that you set for yourself, because boundaries first start with you before it starts with others. And once you know and you're aware of what you want, what types of behaviors from others that you want to accept in your life, then yes, it has to do with actually what standards you have, what your values are, and how you want others to respond to that. But the but what is important here is people don't have to understand your boundaries, but they need to respect them. Does that make sense?
Sure.
They don't have, because people have all kind of boundaries, and sometimes people say, "Well, I don't understand why they acting like that. Why they need us to do that?" No one has to understand your boundaries, but once they are aware of your boundaries, they should respect your boundaries. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
And,
It's
and can I and can I say something else about boundaries?
absolutely.
Like if I seen a beautiful woman and I just stared at them and gazed at them, and based on my um, my eye contact with them, does that um, actually is a violation of a person's boundary? And they never touched them. They never um, said anything to them. But they just kind of stared because there was something about them that made them captivated about that particular person.
Mm, okay. So you asked two things based on your eyes staring at the person. And the second question was about engagement. Well, I'm going to say this about staring. If no one can control who you look at that, I think that's a little bit overreaching when someone say, "Well, they staring at me," and it may feel they that may make a person feel uncomfortable. But the truth of the matter is, no one knows you staring at them unless they're looking at you. So, and someone may assume that you're looking at them, and you may not even be looking at them. So, I think that has to do with pretty much our level of maturity and what and of course, life has happened. Some people, it may be a trigger. And if they share with you that, are you, I would approach it, "Are you staring at me? Looks like you're staring at me." Because you may not be staring at the person. But if you are and you say, "Well, yeah, I was staring at you." And if they say, "Well, I can't control you looking at me, however, it makes me uncomfortable." At that point, if someone tells you that it makes them uncomfortable, "Could you please not just stare at me like that?" Then it's up to you to respect that boundary or not. But your engagement, you further stated you didn't touch them. So I guess I'm trying to get clarification. What type of engagement are you actually referring to?
Well, I'm just saying, um, you may see a person
You
that
attracted to?
you are attracted to, right?
Okay.
And so you hadn't verbally introduced yourself, but what you did do is that you stared, and maybe you were taking advantage of the situation to let that person know that I like to meet you, or that you are I am attracted to you, and so I was just wondering, would that be like a creepy person over extending their boundary by the way that they stare.
Well,
Even if they had even if they had just dark shades on, you couldn't even see the eye,
well, here's
but
the,
they was just
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no. That was it.
Okay, so first of all, if they have dark shades on, how do you know they're staring at you? Because sometimes we have to make sure that we're not suspicious and paranoid. And like I stated, life has happened. People have had some maybe not so good experiences, so it may trigger something in them. But people are not necessarily responsible for your triggers. And that's a different topic. One day I'll talk about trauma, but people are not necessarily responsible for your trigger. People have a right to wear glasses. If they have sunshades on, you don't know if they're staring at you. So that's just a perception. And the best thing to do about that is to move around and think differently. However, but if you're seeing a beautiful woman and you want to engage with her, it's not overstepping a boundary to speak to her and let her know that, you know, you find her beautiful or whatever your pickup line is. It's nothing wrong with that. That's not overstepping a boundary unless one, you're too close to her. You need to at least, you should never walk up, especially on someone you don't know. You need to be within at least an arm's length, a distance away from them if you're talking to them. There's nothing wrong with complimenting someone, and it's nothing wrong as long as you don't touch them, because like I talked about earlier, physical boundaries has to do with personal space. You have to respect people's personal space. An arm length or two, especially if it's someone you have not met, it's okay to ask them, how are you doing? I just want to, is it okay if I approach you? Or is it okay if I can say something to you? And it's okay to do that. And I believe, especially if it's someone you're attracted to, that you will literally, I think you would gain a little bit more respect from them and access to them by asking permission. Did I answer your question?
No, somewhat, but maybe I don't want to ask for permission. Maybe I just want to just look at them.
Okay, well, we can't, it's nothing against the law of you looking at anyone. You can look at as many people as you want to. And one thing for sure, if I know if it was me and I felt like someone was staring me down, then if I feel uncomfortable, I'm going to move around because I have no control over if someone's staring at me, or you don't have any control of anyone staring at you. And at that point, that's when you make a decision to make your exit. So, but
Is that a porous boundary? Since you can't stop anybody from looking at you.
but actually, no, that's not a porous boundary. That's just something we have no control over. There are things that we have control over, but then there are things we don't have control over. And we have to learn the difference. People have a right to look, people have a right to stare. We don't have to engage it and we don't have to entertain it. We have control over ourselves. So if I'm uncomfortable in an environment where someone is staring at me, or I just feel or assume they're staring at me, I have a right to remove myself from that area or that position. So we have control only over ourselves, not over others. So no, I wouldn't consider that a porous boundary or anything. I don't consider that. That really doesn't have really a lot to do with boundaries. That has to do with rights. You have a right to look at whomever you desire to look at. That's a right. So we have to know now, if you're looking at someone and you know that you are being facetious or doing whatever, then that means you need to practice your own personal disciplines. That's a different topic for another session. But I thank you for sharing it with me, because we'll make sure that we add that to some of our information. And if you have any more information you want to contribute or questions you have, Daryl, you can actually send that information to dweedmylife@gmail.com. But thank you for calling, and you have a great rest of your day.
Okay.
All right. So, again, look, I just want us to understand boundaries are one thing, excuse me, but we have personal rights. People have rights. We do not have control over who people look at. You only have control over who you look at. That's a right. We have personal rights just like we have personal boundaries. And people have rights. And it's one of the things, and we're going to talk about healthy relationships as well in some of our sessions about being in relationships. And you're telling your partner, you better not look at that person, or you better not. Come on, y'all, we have to get healthy. But that's why we're here. That's why we're at Let's Talk Tuesdays with Dr. Lowe, because a healthier you produces a healthier life for you, and it helps you gain proper perspective because you will gain access to healthy tools and healthy skills. But I believe that's our session for the day. Remember to comment if you're watching this section later. Please place your comments. Put your comments in the chat. Put your comments in the chat. If this show is helping you, please share it with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, and have them to come in, because we have enough unhealthy, toxic people in our society. And y'all, we must grow up and out of some of the negative, toxic behaviors that we display as a society so that we can have a healthier society, because we're becoming a healthier people. This is Dr. Lowe, the People's Coach. Until next time, thank you for joining us. And one of these, bye-bye.